Hey guys, Zomfox here, and today we're going to be looking at all the major changes from year 1 to year 2 of the United Football League. Now, we did a video just like this a couple years ago with the United States Football League with their 2022 to 2023 season. We looked at some of the biggest changes, and we're going to be doing a very similar style of that one. The only difference is we're not going to be talking about a lot of the big players that switch teams and everything like that, though a couple big names was Chris Odom leaving the Houston Roughnecks going to Arlington Renegades, St. Louis Battlehawks cutting their quarterback A.J. McCarron, and are going to be starting either Manny Wilkins or Max Duggan, per recent reports. And the Brahmas basically getting rid of their whole quarterback room minus Kevin Hogan, and will be starting Kellen Mond. So with all that out of the way, we're going to look at the big major changes. We're not going to be talking about some of the minor things like ESPN broadcasters. These are all the big changes, with the first one being the Houston Roughnecks leaving Rice Stadium and going back to TDECU. Huge change. Universally praised. Rice Stadium had a lot of problems. Look, the Roughnecks themselves had a lot of problems. The decision to go from the Gamblers to the Roughnecks instead of either keeping them as the Gamblers or keeping the Roughnecks pissed a lot of people off. Then the team regressed, so that pissed a lot of people off too, and the team moved to Rice, which also made a lot of people mad. I've talked to a lot of people who were fans of the Roughnecks who were in Houston area. They did not like Rice Stadium. It was just in a worse place, a worse field, worse stadium than TDECU. A big issue, as you can see, is they forced the league to keep the Rice logo on the middle of the field, which everybody hated. Now they're going to be going back to TDECU, which is where they played in the 2020 iteration of the Roughnecks and the 2023 version. So we're going back to a stadium that people actually like and the team has history at. More importantly, the last time they were at TDECU, their attendance was much better than it was this past season. Back in 2023, they averaged 12,000 fans per game compared to the 7,000 we saw this past season. Now, while I don't expect the attendance to be up to 12,000, to put it simply, if you were to bet money that any team was going to increase in attendance from year 1 to year 2, the Roughnecks would probably be the safest bet along with the Showboats, but really the Roughnecks, just because they're going back to TDECU. It's a much better place to play. It's going to look a lot better on TV, which of course is a huge plus. So overall, big change, great change. Nobody's really upset about this. Everybody's happy about it. And that's really the only big stadium change, as of course this is the first time in spring football we're seeing every single team come back from year 1 to year 2 with no changes. Of course, the original USFL added and took away teams every year. The XFL only lasted a year each time. And other leagues like the UFL, which wasn't a spring league, but was similar to this version of the UFL, changed teams. So, big change, that's the Roughnecks. And then the Showboats have the first and only change of head coach in the UFL. The Showboats do not have John DeFilippo as a head coach. He has stepped down. So did their GM. The Roughnecks also had a GM change. But the big thing is the head coach, and of course, the Showboats got a new one in Ken Wisenhunt, a former Super Bowl coach, not winning, but got a team to a Super Bowl, and Jaron Horton, of fame from the Pittsburgh Maulers, is back as the DC for this team. This is a huge 1-2 punch, and a lot of people are really happy about it. A lot of people expected Jaron Horton to get the head coaching role, especially when the team was signing a lot of Maulers, but when he ended up being the DC and Ken Wisenhunt was the head coach, it was a great pair. You have a guy that nobody really saw coming as being a head coach in this league in Ken Wisenhunt, and then you have a guy in Jaron Horton, who is somebody that the last time he was DCing in spring football put together an incredible defense with the Maulers. This is a great duo to have leading this team. Again, they had a new GM, so did the Roughnecks, but pretty much those were all the major changes. A couple other teams had minor changes on their coaching staff or a coordinator change. Like the Roughnecks basically added one guy, but in terms of big ones, the Showboats had the change overall. New GM and new coaching staff. Of course, big 1-2 punch here, and that's the Showboats. Now, the next big change is Friday Night Football. Look, we can look at the schedule in depth, but really the schedule is pretty similar. The only real difference is that there's 2 less regional games. Instead of there being 3 regional broadcast games, only 1. The big change is Friday Night Football. For those of you who do not remember, the UFL this past season, every single game was on Saturday and Sunday. There was no weekday game. It was just those 2 days. But now we are on a weekday, and that is Friday every single week at 8 p.m. EST. Which means that, yes, for the first time in this modern spring football era, we have a weekly game where every single day of the week at the same time it is going to have a game. 8 p.m. EST on Friday will be Friday Night Football. Of course, there are some questionable decisions like the opening game being at TDECU, which is a great return, but a lot of people expect it to be in St. Louis. Overall, though, it's still incredible to have. This, of course, is going to be on Fox as well. Again, same network, same time, every single week. Great decision. A lot of people are really excited and looking forward to this, hoping the ratings are good, especially since the ratings for things like Friday Night College Football ended up being as good as they were. It'll be interesting to see exactly how well the UFL does, especially filling in that SmackDown role of where SmackDown used to be. Overall, though, massive change to the schedule. Adding this in is a great change. I've talked about this for years, ever since the 2022 USFL, that if you're going to have a game on a weekday, you need to have it be the same day every single week. You can't just put it on Thursday one time, and Monday one week, and at different times. This is what people have been asking for. Incredible to have Friday Night Football. Massive change. Again, another one that's basically been universally praised. Then we have the UFL College Draft. Again, just like the USFL with their 2022 draft being different from their 2023 draft, the UFL is similar. The UFL went from having the two supplemental drafts, having like the dispersal and the super draft, to having a legit college draft. And we've already seen a lot of these guys sign. This isn't like the USFL one where we pretty much saw really the Maulers were the only team that really, got a lot of those guys. We've seen multiple guys. These are just three of them, right? Evandy Rigby for the Showboats, Jacarius Spivey for the Roughnecks, and Chavon Cordero for the Battlehawks are all guys that were picked in the UFL college draft. There's been a lot of other guys who got picked, signed, and then didn't even make the team, as well as other guys who have made the team. Certain teams like the Stallions don't really have any on the roster, and a couple others have multiple. So we're seeing this college draft already have a big effect, to the point where it's pretty safe to say that it's overall been done better than the USFL did it, which makes sense that this is really the second iteration of this specific format. Again, the XFL had their own kinds as well, but this draft so far, we'll see how well these guys play, but in terms of getting these guys to their teams, it's worked out pretty well so far. So, of course, that was another big change from year one to year two, and this is another good change, so solid one there. And then, of course, we have the rule changes. This is the second to last thing I'm going to be talking about. Now, the minor change is no onside kicks. I bet a lot of you don't even realize onside kicks were an option because no one would do it because the 4th and 12 was much easier to pull off than the onside kick, so they just got rid of it. Then, of course, you have the controversial change, which is the kickoff change. They're going back to the XFL style of kickoff change, though the one thing that makes it better than, let's say, the NFL's version of the kickoff is that the UFL is, again, going to make it a very big penalty if you don't do what you're supposed to. Again, the rules are all stated there directly, but unlike the NFL, where there's really not too much of a punishment for, kicking it in the touchback and all that, the UFL, you don't want to have it, be bad. If it's short of the landing zone, it's at the 40-yard line. Touchback spots are not great, of course, like the 35-yard line if it's kicked directly into the end zone. So, really solid changes there in terms of the yardage penalty if you're going to do that format. Again, it's a controversial change. A lot of people like that the USFL's kickoff style was more traditional but still had a lot of returns. Again, a lot of people like this, a lot of people don't, but the one that is universally praised is the head coach's super challenge. Yes, the super challenge, something that everybody loves, is getting a buff. The super challenge is now going to be able to be used twice if your first one is successful. This is a great change, and the biggest reason is because we saw a lot during this past season. There would be a play that was obviously wrong, whether it be there was an obvious fumble, whether it be an obvious false start, obvious offsides, pass interference, that coaches just wouldn't challenge because it was the first or second quarter, and you wanted to save your challenge for the fourth quarter when the game matters a lot more and each call has a bigger impact. Now you make it to where you can use that first one on a guaranteed success, and then you'll have the second one for later in the game. This is also going to be a very, very big way to see how good coaches are at using that challenge, because now you're expected to use it when it's a guaranteed success. So if you use your first one and it fails, it's going to look really bad on you as a head coach. So this is a brilliant change, and honestly I think is the best change from year one to year two, aside from going back to TDECU and maybe Friday nights. This is a great rule change, an incredible one. If you hate the kickoff change, if I'm somebody who hates the XFL kickoff, I don't hate it, I just prefer the USFL method. I'm more than happy taking that if it means I get this head coaching challenge change, because this is a brilliant rule change. Now, the last change is, of course, the union. Now, just like with 2022 to 2023's USFL, where we actually gained a union, this time we switched it. So the UFL used the USFL's Players Association the first season, but then during the offseason they changed to UFPA. Now, this is something that's been a contentious topic. You can look on Twitter, Instagram, Discord. You'll see a lot of players that did not necessarily like this. If you look on certain posts, you've seen guys like Chris Rowland and Boogie basically say things, or not say it directly, but like post or comment on posts that essentially say they did not like the UFPA over the UFLPA. Mainly the guys higher up on the UFLPA. But of course, during the offseason, we've seen a lot of big talk about the CBA not being filed. At least as of recording this and the day this is posted, more than likely, a CBA has not been reached. Now, this doesn't really mean anything for the season starting. Everybody knows there's no strike that's going to happen. But this is going to cause, contentious for next season. We've had big things, of course, the NFLPA publicly siding with the UFL players. it's one of those topics where it's pretty obvious that both sides are in the wrong. On one hand, the players haven't really fully come up with what they wanted, but if they want like a 10K raise and full health care, that ain't happening. But if the UFL thinks that they're going to get away with only giving like a $150 raise per game, that ain't happening either. You know what I mean? It feels like both sides are probably in the wrong here and they need a middle ground. I've said it before, I think the best way is to either put absolutely no pay raise or a very, very minimal, but give full year-long health care. I think that's a solid compromise. We'll see. Again, the UFPA did put unfair labor charges, though at least from what I've seen, it's probably not going to work due to it being in Texas and a lot of things like blaming the Dormade cut because of him being part of the whole, QB strike and all the other stuff he's done, when Dormade was easily the weakest of the three quarterbacks that team had. You know what I mean? So odds are that's probably not going to go anywhere. It's going to be interesting to see if the league either A, keeps the UFPA, or the players keep the UFPA. They go back to the UFLPA, or they just don't do a union. Really, this seems like something that's not really going to be talked about during the season, but it's going to hit harder during the offseason. We'll have to wait and see on that, but that's pretty much all it is for that. And so, that'll do it. This has been Zomfox. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to subscribe and hit the bell. The season is starting in less than a week. Again, I'm going to have my Week 1 power rankings come out on Monday. My game picks on Friday. Super 6 should be out on Thursday. And again, we're going to be live streaming the first kickoff game for this upcoming season between the Battlehawks and the Roughnecks in a live play-by-play. And probably the Panthers Showboats game as well that weekend. Don't know 100% sure what that second game is, but probably that one. So be on the lookout for all of that. If you've been a fan of the channel for a while, think about becoming a community member for as low as 99 cents a month. You get an exclusive video every month. You get multiple team emojis. You get 6 separate team emojis you can use in the chat or comments, as well as other benefits like previews to upcoming videos with thumbnails and all that. And as always, guys, have a great night.